Hello class, my name is Lucas and I'm going to present you my article about the plasmodium infection and its effect on fecundity, on survival of Culex ppn mosquitoes. So plasmodium is the malaria parasite, which is a serious and sometimes deadly disease that affects the blood cells. It's transmitted via mosquitoes, and a lot of different plasmodium strains can cause malaria, but in this study they got the one that causes malaria in birds, which is the Plasmodium relictum. And in order to have a efficient transmission, Plasmodium depends on the fitness of the vectors, so they can complete the incubation period. So studies in the last decade show that infected mosquitoes had shorter lifespans when compared to uninfected ones. However, the results show that the negative effects are more likely to happen in non-natural mosquito plasmodium infections. And other separate studies show that plasmodium could also decrease fecundity and also fertility. So the number of eggs would decrease, and the number of eggs that would hatch would also decrease with the plasmodium infection. Uh, the study used the natural mosquito plasmodium system, and they try to correlate fecundity and lifespan of the mosquitoes in order to find out how plasmodium acted on each one of the variables and how they would affect each other. And as a result, they were able to provide conclusions about the hypothesis stated in this slide. The study used three different strains of Culex ppns, the S lab, the S4, SA4B4, and the SR. And to get the different lines of mosquitoes, uh, they obtain them through backcrossing and try to avoid genetic drift as much as possible. And SG1 plasmodium they used, the relictum, was isolated from birds caught in France in 2009 and passed to the canaries through injection. The first experiment focused solely on the survival of the mosquitoes. They chose 70 female mosquitoes of each strain and put them in different experimental cages for a total of 10. And after the first day of blood meal, the unfed and dead mosquitoes were removed, and they had to discard one of the cages because 50% of the mosquitoes were not blood fed. On the first day after the blood meal, they got 15 mosquitoes from each cage and got them in plastic tubes, and they got their oocysts analyzed in the midguts. The second experiment tried to quantify and correlate fecundity and longevity simultaneously, and again they got 70 mosquitoes of each strain, but this time they were divided in 5 infected and 5 non-infected cages. After the first day of blood meal, they got uh, all the engorged females, got them in plastic tubes with water so they could lay their eggs. And after the 7th day of blood meal, 10 from each cage were picked, and they got their midguts oocysts analyzed too. In the study, the provided canary was the independent variable because it changed from infected and non-infected. The rate of survival, fecundity, and fertility varied between the different variables, and they used the same strains and the same amount of larvae per strain. Uh, These graphs show that the SA4B4 had twice as much risk of death than the other ones, and it also had a lower value of fecundity and fertility. And this one shows what the hypothesis stated, how survival and fecundity were negatively correlated. So on the first experiment, they found about the insecticide effect, uh, and 83% of the mosquitoes that got the infected canary got at least one oocyst. Uh, as the image showed, as A4B4 had twice as death risk than the S-lab ones. And they also measured the wing lengths of the mosquitoes, but they got a similar wing length between all the strains. For the second experiment, when they tried to measure fecundity and hatching success and the survival, all correlated, uh, fecundity was highly dependent on the infection status. Uh, and the egg rafts of the infected females contained, on average, more or less 4 eggs than the rafts of the uninfected ones. And on average, 92% of the eggs produce at least one larva. The median survival was increased by infection, and the mosquitoes that got more eggs survived the least after the egg laying. And all three strains had similar results, and among all of them, the fecundity was harshly affected by infection, and the survival was like highly increased as well. So, as a conclusion, um, the researchers said that longevity and fecundity should be correlated because oviposition deprivation is very unlikely to happen in nature, and fecundity and longevity in this case are closely related, and that they were able to prove that the plasmodium relictum would relocate the nutrients used for survival to increase reproduction and increase its transmission. This is where I got the article from, if you guys want to take a look at it. And if you have any questions, just let me know. Thank you.